Hello everybody, David again, New View Safety Coach. This is number 2 in the series of Don't Watch This series. Still trialing out lots of things, trying to make new improvements. So what have I changed since the last one? So as soon as I put up on YouTube, I realized that I should have been recording with the phone in landscape, not portrait. So the phone's in landscape now, which actually turned out to be a bit harder than what I thought, because the clamp holds the buttons and it locks the screen and does lots of awkward stuff and messes with the volume. It's a nightmare. I also didn't like the sound quality of the first one, so I got myself a little lapel mic. I don't know whether you can see it. In a black shirt, it's a black mic, so hopefully it doesn't stand out too much. So those are the two main. Oh, the third main difference is I splashed out $40, I think it was Australian, on an app for my Chromebook, a video editing app. So hopefully I'll be able to cut out the beginning when I'm not sat down, and may even be able to do some other funky things once I learn how to do them. So there's that. What's the same? Same annoying ring light, which just looks like I'm talking into a ring of light, which is annoying. Same ironing board, same box with the tripod on. Yeah, same awkwardness, same dodgy backdrop with my plants everywhere. One addition though is this little fellow. I don't know whether you'll be able to see him too well. This is Mini-Me David Mini-Me. So when I recently left a job for a consultancy firm here in Perth, Australia. But before I left, this is actually last year, I graduated from UWA, University of Western Australia, in business psychology. And this was ordered then, but it only came through the other day. This is middle of February the following year. And this was bought by the company that I used to work for. I don't know whether you'll be able to see that if I move it in. I'm not too sure. It's actually a really good likeness of me, I think. It's even got the grey bits in the beard, in the goatee. I'll take a picture and figure out if I can put it somewhere in the video, hopefully. So he lives up there. So yeah, those are the main changes. Mini-Me, camera in landscape, not portrait, lapel mic. So we'll see how that goes. So what I've been thinking about, and I've had conversations with some good friends about what I'd like to make content about. As you're probably aware, I've got my two passions, which is New View Safety and organizational coaching, which is where New View Safety Coach came from. And they're two distinct disciplines, very distinct. They do come together very well. And at points when they do come together, I write quite a few blogs for my website. I'll put a link in the video. I'm not going to do that thing where they point up or down, because I've not figured out which side it's going to be on yet. So somewhere, you have to find it. There's going to be a link. See if you can find it. And that link, you follow the link, you go to my blogs, you'll see the blogs that I write. Some of them are specifically about organizational coaching. Some of them are specifically about New View Safety, and I'm trying to come up with, trying to connect the two, so how they join together, essentially, how they benefit each other, how they can work together, common themes, attributes, outcomes, philosophies, potentially. So what I thought I would do for this video 2 in the Don't Watch series is I thought I would give a brief overview of a recent blog that I've just done. Actually released it. So what are we today? We're the 13th of February, day before Valentine's Day, which is always a very sad time of year for me. Not really. This was released on Monday, so it's released yesterday. And it's done quite well. And it's a good example of what I've been talking about in relation to organizational coaching and New View Safety. The blog post is titled Psychological Biases in Safety Leadership, the Role of Introspection in Organizational Coaching. Now, I'm not going to read the whole blog because that'd be very boring for you when you can just go and read it yourself. But I am going to read the opening sentences, the opening 2 sentences, to give a bit of context as to what I want to waffle on about and why I wrote this post in the first place. So I've already covered the title. First couple of sentences, and I've got my computer on the side of the keyboard, so if I look down here, it's not because I'm ignoring you, I'm just trying to, I can't memorize these lines, even though I wrote them. In the realm of organizational safety, effective leadership is paramount. Yet, even the most well-intentioned leaders can fall prey to psychological biases that hinder their ability to foster a safe and secure work environment. From hindsight bias to the fundamental attribution error and the just world hypothesis, these cognitive pitfalls can obscure judgment and impede safety initiatives. So those are the opening sentences. And I hope with the title, giving you some context there. So I suppose if I was to break it down, it would be something like wanting to do well as a safety leader, or as a leader who's responsible for safety, because safety leadership and leadership are pretty much the same thing. One's just got a context of safety to it. Wanting to do well, having initiatives and drive and ambition and passion and control, sometimes seen as a bad thing, but it's not always. Moderation. Having all these attributes as a leader are great, but if you're not I was going to say if you're not self-aware, that's a bit harsh. If you're not aware that you harbor internal biases, psychological biases, such as those 3 that I mentioned there, hindsight bias, fundamental attribution error, and just world hypothesis. If you're not aware of these biases that you have, you won't be aware as to how they can affect your ability as a leader or a safety leader in the organization. And they're well-known psychological biases which interfere with or disrupt the efficiency of safety performance within an organization. So that's why I wrote this particular blog. And the idea behind it, well, it's not really an idea. I mean, this is all scientific. It's well proven in the psychological realm and organizational psychology realm as well, that if you create a space with an organizational coach, especially one who has safety as a specialist field of interest, such as myself, who's aware that these biases might be present within the context of a safety leader, The coach can stay aware for these biases, and not directly point out that the coachee has them and that they have to change them, because that's incorrect. It's not what organizational coaching is about. However, ask powerful questions which can highlight the fact that the person may be experiencing the effects of these biases. I'm not going to go into detail as to how that's done, because that's a whole other video all by itself, and it's a lot easier when you actually sat with a coachee as opposed to trying to describe it. But it's centered around things like, well, let's have a look what I put in my blog. Fostering self-awareness. So the introspection brought about by having an organizational coach, especially one in the context of this who is aware of and a practitioner in the New View Safety Differently field. The coach can encourage a leader to examine their thoughts, examine their feelings, examine their motives and the meaning that they give to words around particular situations that they will find themselves in the world. So you've got the fostering the self-awareness there. The challenging of assumptions. This is an interesting one because people, there's another blog post actually of mine, being poked in the axioms. If you go to my website and have a look at the blog post, you'll see that particular post there. Axioms are axiomatic truths, things we take for granted, unquestionable truths, and assumptions can sometimes be unquestionable truths. And people don't like, as I said in the blog post, people don't like being poked in the axioms, or people don't like having their assumptions challenged. It makes us feel vulnerable, stupid sometimes, naive, unaware. So this is the subtle dance. This is where trust is needed when you're dealing with an organizational coach, because the subject matter and the content of what we're talking about can elicit strong emotions while the person is exploring their own thoughts and their own feelings and their own meaning that they're attaching to things. So this challenging assumptions that has to be done with trust and care, and with respect as well. There are no assumptions from me as a coach when I'm talking to somebody. Guaranteed they know more than me in some areas, and I may know other things that they don't know, but it's not about who knows what. It's about organizational coaching, especially around the GROW model, is about revealing within the coachee their own capabilities, their own resilience, their own self-awareness. And that's done through questions, that's done through self-reflection, that's done through lots of different techniques and tools that we use as organizational coaches. And the third way, especially in relation to these biases, is promoting accountability. So what did I say about that in the blog? Effective coaching encourages leaders to take ownership for their decisions and actions, including any biases that may influence them. So what do I mean by that? I'm saying, as a leader, you're not just responsible for giving orders. You're responsible for the outcome of those orders. And you're responsible for the way, for the reason that you gave those orders or commands or instructions, whatever it was. And what motivated you as a leader in order to do what you did. So you have to be accountable for not just what you tell people to do or you do yourself. You have to be accountable for the way that your thought process generates those commands, instructions, directions, whatever they are. It's a bit of a long-winded way of saying being self-aware as to what's driving you as a leader, safety leader, frontline leader, whatever kind of leader you are. What is driving you to behave, to think the way that you are thinking and behaving? Because if you become more aware of that, you become more aware of these psychological biases that you may have. While we're talking about these biases, we've not really spoke about them, we skipped over that. And they're quite interesting. I quite like them actually. I work in safety. Hindsight bias, that's well documented, well talked about in the safety arena anyway. Essentially, in a nutshell, it's looking at the effect of a situation, usually an incident, accident, something that's happened, and thinking to yourself and saying out loud, or ruminating on the fact, oh well, that's a simple. Why did the person make such a stupid mistake? It's obvious that was going to happen. What else could have happened? It was always going to lead that way. They should have known better. Anybody could have seen, anyone could see that if you did X, it's going to lead to Y. It becomes a straight line. Sidney Dekker calls it the Dekker tunnel from memory. And it's essentially you're looking through this tunnel, and it's in hindsight, looking through a tunnel, so where the person started out and the effect, and it's very linear. Whereas in reality, well, a couple of things. If the person knew that that was going to be the outcome, 99% of the time they wouldn't have done whatever it is they did, which led to the outcome. So if you can start from there as a point, then that in itself raises a whole heap of questions around intent, if nothing else. But what this hindsight bias does, it neglects to take into account any factors, be they environmental, personal, biological, environmental, already mentioned that one, societal, any other factor that you can think of which would have had an impact, even the person's own cognitive capability, tiredness, fatigue, whatever it is, their own personal biology. What other factors are you completely ignoring when you say that incident was bound to happen if the person did X, Y, and Z? Because if you're starting from a place of intent of this person didn't do it to have an accident, then there has to be some other reason. There's probably, if you look at it, there's probably 100 other things that the person was calculating and dealing with and thinking about, and not thinking that they were going to have an accident. And I'm not saying being distracted. They could have been thinking about things which are related to the task or the process, whatever it is they're involved in. But you don't see that when you look back with hindsight. What is it they say? Life in a rearview mirror. I'm going to get this totally wrong and end up sounding like a famous U.S. president who stuffed up another famous saying. I can't remember the name. I hate it when that happens. It's always easier to know what's happened as opposed to what's going to happen. I think it's a gist of the saying I'm trying to remember. And that's true in the safety world as well. And this hindsight bias, this psychological bias that kicks in, will moderate how a leader looks at an incident, looks at the effects of an incident. Because if you look at it and say, oh, well, that's obvious, they shouldn't have done that. Why did they do that? It all becomes about blame. Blaming the individual. I'm not saying, see, you've got to remember as well that there's a big difference between blame and accountability here. I'm not saying that people shouldn't be held accountable. I'm just saying blaming people when they didn't mean to make a mistake means that you're not looking closely enough or taking all the facets into account as to what else might have had an impact on why the person behaved the way they behaved. So these biases, psychological biases, unless you're aware that you have them, your actions are going to be affected by these biases. So the more you know about yourself and the biases you have, the more aware you will be when you react in a certain way. and you'll be able to moderate it and pull it back and go, okay, well, if I behave in this way, it's going to drive people, it's going to blame people for starters. Everyone else is then going to become fearful of potentially making a mistake because they're going to get the wrath of the leader. And we're not going to learn anything either because we've already sorted the problem. The problem was the individual and what they did. When likely the problem actually is a multifaceted combination of lots of different things, and a lot of them will be the system that the leader is responsible for looking after. Yeah, I think I've waffled on enough about hindsight bias. Fundamental attribution error is another psychological bias. And this bias involves attributing others' behavior to internal characteristics while overlooking external factors. So a nice way of thinking about this is from Andy. She's a HOP mentor in America, and she's a pioneer and practitioner, very famous practitioner of HOP, human and organizational performance. And she's got a podcast, and she talks about these psychological biases as well. And this one is she has a great way of describing it, which is fundamental attribution errors. When you're in your car and you're driving along, and maybe somebody cuts in front of you or turns off suddenly without indicating and causes a disruption to you, for you to slow down, for you to swerve to not hit somebody, or they make you, they're gonna make you slow when you're in a rush or whatever. Your first instinct is bad driver, stupid person, idiot. Whatever it is, it's going to be focused on the individual and their personal characteristics. Fundamental attribution error, that's fundamental attribution error. When in reality, so let's take a situation. You're driving along and a car comes steaming up on either side of you, dangerous, cuts in front of you, forces you to slam on the anchor, and then takes a turn straight off the road. And you, idiot. What a buffoon. You don't know, and I'm not saying this is the case, but that could be a husband or a wife rushing to school because their child's been found choking or having a asthma attack or a diabetic reaction, and they've got to rush there and they want to be with their child as soon as possible. You don't know these things. You just automatically assume they're a bad driver or they're a bad person. And assuming they're a bad driver or a bad person, you write them off as an individual. You don't look any further. A little bit like hindsight bias, this one. You don't look at the causation, the unseen elements. And what it does again, fundamental attribution error, can cause blame, which can ultimately lead to fear in the organization, and lead to other things such as lack of reporting, fear of reporting if they do, self-blame when people have accidents. They think it's their fault as opposed to something else around them. And people are actually I've interviewed a lot of people post-incident, post-accident, and you'd be surprised how many people say, oh no, I'm at fault, I'm the idiot, it's all my fault, I should have known better, I'll try harder. It's like, whoa, hold on, no. Let's look at the system and see if there's anything there. Because just blaming others or letting other people blame themselves really doesn't fix it. If whatever it was, if the mistake that someone made was made by that person and not fixed, you can guarantee somebody else will make the same mistake at another time. So these biases, to wrap up this section, these biases, psychological biases, vary from individual to individual. And the reason why I focused on 3 is because they have such a profound effect on how leaders enact safety in an organization. HOP has HOP has 5 principles. Human organization performance has 5 principles, and the last principle, the 5th principle, is response matters. And what they mean by response matters is the way leaders respond to incidents or accidents matters. And there's a reason it matters. Like I said before, if you respond with blame and punishment only, then you will create a certain type of environment and a certain type of culture in your organization. If you respond with curiosity, which, as you know, is a big thing and a big theme of mine and New View Safety, if you respond with curiosity and learning, it doesn't mean someone can't be held accountable for what they did, but it means that you fix what happens and it won't happen again. It also means that the broader organization of people who are witnessing what's going on aren't fearful. They don't dread telling their leaders bad news for fear of retribution and blame, or even being fired. There's a famous saying here in Australia, especially for the people who work on the mines, "Oh, that's a window seat, that is." And what they're referring to if you make a mistake, have an incident, you'd be put back on the plane because they fly from home, well, not from home, from the airport out to site, which is in the middle of desert in Newman usually, or Pilbara somewhere. That's a window seat or an aisle seat, means you'd be put back on the plane, you'd be flown home, which means you're going to be sacked. And that still goes on. It's 2024, February 2024, and I know for a fact that still goes on. And I understand why leaders do it. You know, we have to take safety seriously. And if we take it seriously, we cannot tolerate anyone who makes a mistake, and especially if especially if the consequences are serious, someone gets injured or, heaven forbid, somebody dies. So when that does happen, and we can find someone to blame, we're going to get rid of them. And that's a whole video all in itself, that is, in relation to the impact that has on the organization and the individual and the people who are in the organization, the culture of the organization as well. So anyway, I'm digressing again and waffling on. So that was the reason why I did the blog. And as you can see, I mean, it takes 2 minutes to read the blog, a minute and a half. It's very condensed and very short. And I like to keep them, within 2-3 minutes of reading, just to spark interest or curiosity as to what I might be waffling on about. But hopefully I put enough in there for you to look at it and think, you know what? I'd like to know more about this. Reach out to me, send me a message, whatever it is. Well, that sounds interesting. I wonder if anybody else is talking about this. Do more of a search online. That's my ultimate aim, I suppose, to spark curiosity in people who are watching this. So, I think I've waffled on enough. I don't know how long I've been waffling on, but it feels like probably 15-20 minutes or so, so I'll call it a day. And don't watch. It's the Don't Watch series, so don't watch it. I'm still learning.